In today's episode, we're in conversation with Monica Reinagel, who is a distinguished nutritionist, author, and creator of the popular Nutrition Diva podcast. She addresses common misconceptions, offers practical tips for healthier eating habits, and discusses the creation of her app. Monica also explores accommodating diverse dietary needs, the physiological drivers for dietary behaviors, and how nutrition science continues to evolve and impact her work. Stay tuned. Monica Reinagel is a nationally known nutritionist, speaker, and health coach who specializes in behavioral health. As the host of two top-rated podcasts, Monica also works with individuals and groups through a variety of online programs that focus on healthy eating habits, sustainable weight management, emotional eating, healthy aging, and much, much more. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much, Shireen. Great to be here.
And great to have you on. So, Monica, tell us a little bit more about your journey into becoming a nutritionist. You started out as an opera singer. I am so curious to learn what that journey looked like and what really inspired this significant career change.
Yeah, it was an unconventional path. I originally went to school as an opera singer. I always imagined, or for music, I imagined I would be a musician. And I did do that professionally for about 10 years in my early adulthood. And I became aware of the fact that I was looking for a career shift, something else to spend my professional life doing, or something in addition to singing. But I was lucky enough to have this other area that was also really interesting to me. I think these days we call that multi-passionate, right? So I was passionate about music and performing, but I was also really interested in health and wellness and nutrition. And I saw an opportunity there to develop another career that would be just as motivating, just as satisfying. So I did go back to school to earn a master's degree in nutrition and become credentialed in that field, so I could make sure that I was sharing really scientifically based, evidence-based advice and information. And yes, launched my career as the nutrition diva, kind of the having a little bit of each.
I absolutely love that. Help us understand, was there like this intersection, we're coming from sort of like this music world? Were you able to use some of those skills that you've learned in that career over in nutrition and wellness? Was there an intersection there?
I think there might be, because one of my primary ways to share information with the world is through my podcasts. And that is obviously another vocal medium. I get to use my voice. And it's also, in its own way, a form of performance. So I think that that love of performing carried over into the way that I leverage my expertise about nutrition, which is largely through the podcast, through teaching programs, through speaking engagements. So I didn't really leave the stage. I just started using it to talk about different things.
You know, one of the chief things, and now diving into like nutrition specifically, um, one of the things for this episode here we want to be able to address is really closing this gap around good intentions to eat healthy and
Mhm.
then actually being able to develop habits to eat a little bit more healthy. There's a delta there, right? Clearly. What are some, and just help us understand, what are some common misconceptions around nutrition that people tend to carry with them? And then what are some things that you tell them to really help them create some of those healthy habits for themselves?
Shireen, I think you've put your finger exactly on the problem, which is that most of us do have good intentions about wanting to have healthier habits. And to a certain extent, most of us already have some information about what that might look like. We know we'd be better off if we were eating more vegetables, or maybe cutting back on our sugar intake, or moving more frequently. We know all of those things. We want to do them. And yet we do struggle to convert, as you said, those intentions into good habits. And for me, that was a real aha as I was moving through my career, was realizing that that's where people needed support. Actually, was, yes, we need good, solid nutrition information to base our intentions on, but people actually seem to need more support in understanding the mechanics and the nuances of creating sustainable behavior change, which is a whole different thing, really. So this focus on behavior change has really kind of dominated the second half of my career in this field, really helping people bridge that gap, as you said. And I think step one is just acknowledging that knowing does not always equal doing. That we need to do more than just educate ourselves, or if, like you and I, we are in the business of trying to support people, we need to do more than just educate them. We need to do more than just provide information about what they should do. We need to help them, and people need to help themselves understand what's actually driving their behaviors. What is underneath the choices that they are making every day? When we understand those better, we can get a much better handle on them. And what that often ends up looking like is we're not aware how much our schedule or our other obligations may be working against these intentions that we have. And so we need to do some problem solving around that. How do I make a little bit more time in my week to do food shopping or healthy meal prep or meal planning so that I can carry out those intentions, as just one example. So helping people identify what's actually getting in the way, whether it is logistical, environmental, sometimes it's emotional reasons that we depart from our good intentions. When we start to understand what those are, then we can start to problem solve. Okay, how could I help myself around or across this barrier? Or who could help me solve this problem? And then I feel like we can get a lot more traction.
Speaking of which, then, what are some practical tips perhaps that you can offer to our listeners here, just really looking to create those healthy habits? And, one of the concepts around this is like, it doesn't have to be all or none, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of gray in the middle. You can use small, easy steps today while listening to this podcast itself.
Yes.
Can you help walk us through some of those practical tips?
That's exactly it. We tend to stumble over our own ambition or our own perfectionism. We want to get it really right. And when we can't do that, then we sort of stop trying. And so the big insight here is to look around at small changes that we could make consistently, that we could do on an ongoing basis, because those ultimately are going to have a much bigger impact on our results, on our outcomes, than some really big dramatic gesture that we make but can't keep up for more than a day or two, and then we sort of revert. So an example, sometimes people focus on sugar. I'm just eating too much added sugar. I know it's not good for me. I don't maybe even feel well after I've overindulged with sugar. I may actually feel like, ugh, now I feel kind of gross. I really need to get a handle on this. And what they will often be attracted to is like a 30-day sugar detox, where they commit to eliminating all sugar from their diet. And somehow that the extremity of it almost, well, first of all, it makes them more confident that it's going to work. And I'll put work in air quotes. And it kind of gets them excited and on board. And so they commit to this all or nothing, no sugar detox. And then, of course, 5 days in, a coworker has a birthday and some cupcakes come into the office and they have one, and then they feel like, well, I blew my detox, I'm back at square one. Instead, if we could look around and say, okay, how could I reduce my typical sugar intake by 10 or 20%? What could I just adjust or tweak? One substitute. Maybe it's simply replacing an afternoon soda or sweet tea with an unsweetened beverage. Just that one shift to start with, and to start trying to make that more of a habit. Or maybe it's shifting to a different breakfast cereal, or maybe deciding instead of, you pick one thing and look for a substitute, try it out, see if you can make it work, see if you can make it pleasurable, so that it's something that you want to continue doing. And then we can build on that. But I would so much rather help someone cut their added sugar intake by 20% forever than see them cut it out entirely for 30 days and then kind of go back to where they were before.
Mm. And that's really it, right? It's a lot around like when we think like, oh, the answer is in this short-term gain, like this 30-day cleanse or detox. And
Yes.
it can almost be very, it can backfire, right? Which is so unfortunate.
Yeah. Can I add something to
Please,
that
yes.
point? I do a lot of work on weight management with people who are trying to get a handle on their weight. And the way we have all been trained to approach weight loss is let's get it off as quickly as we can. Obviously, we'll be healthier when we weigh less. So let's just get there by whatever means necessary as fast as possible. And then we'll worry about how we're going to maintain that. That'll be easy by comparison, right? We tell ourselves. And so and plus, that kind of rapid weight loss is not very fun. It's not very comfortable. It's really difficult to do. So of course we want to get it over with as quickly as possible. But as you say, this backfires. So maybe we do get ourselves all motivated and we diet off 10 pounds or something like that, and we high five ourselves, we declare victory. But then we aren't able to maintain it. We haven't really thought about what the habits will be that will help us sustain our bodies at that lower weight. We haven't made any of those shifts or even identified where the adjustments might need to be made. And so inexorably, we drift back up to the weight that we started. So much like my example with the sugar reduction, I would rather help people find adjustments in their behaviors that are not geared towards weight loss, but geared towards sustaining a lower weight. And just kind of start at the end. What would my choices and my lifestyle and my behaviors look like if I were somebody who weighed 10 pounds less than I do today? Not what do I have to do to lose 10 pounds? And I know that almost sounds like the exact same thing, said in a different order, but in application and practice, it makes all the difference. It goes to the mindset that we're using when we are implementing those behaviors. It goes to the way we are forming new habits and behaviors. And it goes to actually the physical process of adjusting body weight in a way that is much more sustainable.
And what I'm hearing you say, like there's a perception or we have to sort of change our perception in the way we view weight loss itself. And speaking
Yes.
of perception, actually, you have this great smartphone app. Help us understand what are the types of things that you're hoping to achieve with Nutrition GPA, this app that you have. So yeah, tell us more.
Yes, this app is almost 10 years old now, and it is called the Nutrition GPA, and it is a free app available in the App Store. So anybody can go check it out in the App Store. And it's not free with purchase or anything. It's free forever. And this app I developed actually to help the people I was working with on eating habits, specifically to address what we were talking about a few minutes ago, about that all or nothing mentality and feeling like something had to be really intense in order to do any good. And also as an alternative to diet tracking apps that I see people picking up as an effort to try to control what they're eating, manage what they're eating. They will download an app onto their phone and start logging every single thing they eat, which that's an interesting exercise. You can learn a lot, from that. But it then becomes a real burden where people feel like, oh my gosh, this is really difficult to keep up. So the Nutrition GPA was intended to be kind of an antidote to that, where it would provide some of the same benefits, that awareness that we get when we start to monitor, where we're just tuned in a little bit to what's going in our mouths, because otherwise we're not. And a little bit of accountability, like some feedback as to, how our choices are adding up over time, and an ability to assess how our choices are adding up. So to provide those in a much lighter weight fashion. So in this app, you just answer 10 yes or no questions about what you ate that day. And it's 5 habits that we want to try to do more often, like eating more vegetables, like incorporating beans or legumes into our menus occasionally, right? Eating fish every once in a while. And then there's 5 other questions that address things that we sometimes enjoy because we enjoy them, but we don't want to overdo them, like added sugar, like alcoholic beverages. Let's make sure we're not overdoing. So you answer your 10 yes or no questions, you get a grade for the day, and then we keep track of your grade point average over time to give people a sense, like not just their best day or their worst day, but what's the typical day look like? And my goal for the people that I work with when we use this app in the context of programming is see if you can just maintain a B average. That's good enough. It gives you a little flexibility, a little leeway for the cupcake when the coworker has a birthday, or for that day when you were on the fly and just really couldn't get the vegetables in. There's enough flexibility to accommodate that, but still to kind of keep you on track with an overall approach that is going to be supporting your health and your nutrition. So it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun with it. I'd encourage everybody to check it out and just see what you notice when you start to pay attention a little bit more.
And I like the idea that because it's not about like you have to log everything under the sun that you are eating,
Exactly.
or even sharing in a dinner plate. How do you then strive to accommodate? People have different dietary needs, different preferences through what they eat. But how do you sort of incorporate that through your work on the podcast, within the app itself? How do you,
Yeah.
yeah, what does that perspective look like?
Well, whenever I'm developing programming or tools or even just content, I'm very mindful of the fact that our diets don't all look the same way. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Um, we don't all come from the same cultural heritages. And so we may have grown up in families that eat a lot of beans and tortillas, or a lot of tofu and rice, or a lot of fish and vegetables, or meat and potatoes, whatever. There's a lot of different. And I want people to feel that no matter what their traditional cuisine or even just what they enjoy, it can fit. We don't all have to eat exactly the same way. So that flexibility and diversity, I think, is really important. I'll give you an example. We hear so much about the Mediterranean diet because there's been so much research around it, and it's a great way to eat. But some people look at that and think, what does that have to do with the foods that I grew up eating? That doesn't look like the diet. And so is mine not as good as that diet? And my answer is like, absolutely not. The Mediterranean diet is one way to do it, but we can apply those same principles to a very wide variety of dietary patterns from all around the globe that are all equally able to sustain us both physically and socially, culturally, emotionally, in all those ways. So yeah, that's a real priority. And then the other thing is less maybe romantic and more that we can't all tolerate the same foods. So one of the dietary habits that I really encourage people to experiment with is to incorporate more beans and legumes into their diet. Because there are so many benefits. We hear so much about the microbiome. It's a way to maybe reduce the amount of meat we're eating, and they're delicious. So it's good advice as far as it goes, unless you are someone with irritable bowel syndrome for whom legumes are a disaster, are a nightmare. Does that mean you don't get to eat healthy? Of course not. We need to figure out the healthy patterns that fit your body and your medical needs, but also your preferences and your lifestyle. If you're somebody who loves to cook, then let's really find ways for you to find more healthy recipes to experiment with. If you're somebody who hates to cook, that doesn't exclude you from the healthy eating community. We can make that work as well.
I love how inclusive your approach is. One of the other questions I want to touch on is really just understanding this behavior component a little bit. What drives our behaviors in relation to our diet? And then how can we really create sustainable, sort of long lasting, the ideal, the pinnacle that we're all trying to achieve? How do we create those long lasting change in our behaviors?
Well, first, I'll just say we don't have to reach the pinnacle. If we can get 80% of the way up the hill, that's good enough for me. But there are a lot of things that drive behavior, and part of my task and the task of the people that I work with is developing some awareness around, what those things are. But I'll just give you one that tends to be an influence for all of us, and that is our physical environment. How our homes and offices are arranged have a big impact on the kinds of food choices that we make and how much we move, how sedentary we are. And so one thing that we can do to support our efforts to create healthier habits is something that we refer to as hacking your habitat. Looking around where you spend your time, whether it's your TV room or your kitchen or your office or your home office, and figuring out, what can I do to make healthy choices more accessible, more appealing, more convenient than the less healthy choices? So right now we're recording, and some people might be watching on video, and so you'll be able to see, but my recording equipment, which I use several times a day as a podcaster and as a media spokesperson, is set up at a standing workstation. So if I'm recording, I'm standing. And if I'm writing, I'm at my desk sitting down. So I've kind of built into my environment opportunities to be more active throughout the day and to not be sitting for 8 hours a day, which I otherwise would. But downstairs in the kitchen, we can do similar things. My snacks, and I have them. I got the treats downstairs, but they are not in the cupboard right next to the refrigerator where I'm going to see them every single time I open them. They are tucked away where I don't see them unless I actually make an effort. And actually, they're kind of a hassle to get at. And meanwhile, the raw vegetables that I want to remember to snack on, or the salad I want to have for lunch, or the fresh fruit that I bought is front and center in the fridge. The fruit is out on the counter where I'll see it when I walk into the kitchen, instead of seeing the leftover pie from last night's dinner. Because whatever I see when I walk in the kitchen is a good shot that that's what I'm going to be picking up. So, and there are just so many more ways to do this habitat hacking, to create environments that support the habits that we want to reinforce and make the habits that we're trying to move away from a little bit less convenient. And I think people often underestimate just how impactful that kind of hacking can be.
Oh, I love that. So when you build it in, it doesn't even seem like something conscious. It's already part of the environment that you're in. I absolutely love that hack. With that, I'm going to try to sneak in one more quick question, Monica. Tell us about the types of things that are happening in nutrition science today. What are some of those things that are changing or evolving within nutrition that we should be aware of? And how does that influence the way that you approach providing nutrition education?
It is a quickly developing field, and it is a complex field. Nutrition research is very complex, which means I've got built-in job security, right? Because I'll never run out of things to talk about and to help explain and to help, unpack for people. Two of the things that I think have had the biggest impact over my career on how we look at nutrition and have caused us to kind of, in some ways, have to go back and re-examine what we thought we knew are the influence of the microbiome, the healthy bacteria, the good bacteria that live in our guts. And now this is now 5 or 10 years underway, but it still was such and continues to be such a sea change, because we've now come to understand that this extra organ that we're all carrying around in our gut is massively impactful on everything from our mood to how we process the sugar in our foods, to, there's very little that it is not involved with, to our appetite, our tolerance for exercise. But this wasn't something that was on our radar screen 20, 30 years ago. And so we're scrambling to reassess all of the research on how food affects our bodies by incorporating this question and and also, how does it affect the microbiome, the bugs essentially that are living in our gut, because their health affects our health so profoundly. So we've essentially had to add an entire field to our scope of expertise, which is microbiology, right? This was not our purview before, but now we must understand this complicated interaction, all these little beasties, and how they influence us.
Yeah.
And I think the other huge development that I'm sure you're aware of and your listeners are aware of are these new generation anti-obesity medications, which have been game-changing, also controversial, also confusing. And as I say, game-changing, but they are still not the solution to every aspect of this challenge. But I think that has also, and they affect the behavioral part of it, which is what I spend so much of my time looking at. The influences are not just physiological, but very much psychological and emotional. So it's another one of those situations where we have to kind of back up what we think we know about food and diet and appetite and energy and weight control as this flood of new information is coming in through the trapdoor of these medications, which I think even as they were developing and testing them and what they hoped they would do, they had no idea. They had a tiger by the tail.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Indeed.
we're sorting that out. So those are the two questions that I find myself not scrambling, but investing a lot of energy in staying up to date on a very quickly evolving field. And so for those following nutrition who enjoy following nutrition, you want to make sure that you're picking sources who are keeping up to date because things are changing quick.
Yep. And if you are a source that we want to keep up with, coming to the end of the podcast here, how can our listeners connect with you and just learn more about your work?
Probably the easiest place to find everything in one place is my website, nutritionovereasy.com. And there are links there to both of my podcasts, the one that's about nutrition and the one that's about behavior change, as well as some of the programs and tools that I've developed over the years. So, and if you do stop by the website, please do say hi and tell me that you learned about me from the Yumlish podcast so that I can say hi.
Lovely. Thank you so very much, Monica, for your time. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Yumlish podcast. Head over to our social media to answer this quick question. Have you ever believed in a nutrition myth that was later debunked? So head over to our social media, go to @Yumlish on Facebook, on Instagram, find this podcast post and comment below again to tell us, have you ever believed a nutrition myth that was later debunked? So share your experience with us again. Head over to our social media to answer that quick question. With that, Monica, thank you so very much again.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you, Shireen.